Black Clover chapter 359, titled The Dancing Princess of the Battlefield Once More, begins with Noelle of House Silva being told how much stronger he'd become as his eyes widened and blood poured from the top of his head. His mother, the legendary steel warrior princess Acier Silva, who'd been turned into a paladin, tore into his abdomen with her oversized lance as she coldly proclaimed this to be his end. Now listen, Noelle's position as the strongest member of House Silva has clearly been taken away from him by Noelle a long time ago. But even still, I can't believe this man Tabata really off-screened our boy like this. We've got minor characters getting moments left and right in this battle. But Noelle, eldest child of House Silva, who held it down in his mother's absence and was cursed right alongside her as the only one who knew the true circumstances of her death, is treated like this when she comes back to life as a paladin. That is crazy to me. Imagine if Yami wasn't given a chance to deal with Paladin Morgan simply because Noct is a thing. Like, I seriously had to wonder if I'd missed a chapter or something. Because last we saw, when Julius's invasion began, Noelle and his siblings just stood there in horror and disbelief as their beloved mother descended upon them as an enemy. Noelle recognized her to be their mother, and that was it. Now he's already almost dead. How far the captains have fallen, man, it is really sad to see. I mean, Jack got one shot by Morgan right at the start, losing him an arm and earning him a hole in the torso, and now he's dead. William got one shot by Lucius and lost an arm. Mereo Leona was touched by Morris's magic and she immediately lost her arm, along with the lives of many comrades. And now Noelle got bodied while no one was looking. Place your bets on who will lose an arm next in the comments, along with who you think might die next while you're at it. But thankfully, the new generation is pulling their weight. Hovering above her own destructive handiwork, the Paladin would take in the fate of the Silver Eagles she'd left behind. Speaking of which, am I the only one still wondering who Noelle's dad is? We already have the identities of both of Yuno's parents, and I'm sure the reveal of Asta's dad is something a lot of people are looking forward to. But Noelle's a royal with 3 siblings. Surely the identity of her father isn't some major secret. Assuming he's not around since Noelle took charge over the house, why do they mourn their mother and not their father? I'd like to think that Acier didn't have 4 children with a terrible person, considering her demeanor and legendary accolades, but if you have any guesses, please let me know. Nebra would notice Noelle's bloody descent and call out to him as she shook. Trembling, she paused for a while. Ultimately, with tears flooding her eyes, Nebra would admit that she couldn't bring herself to fight their mother. So yeah, aside from the fact that they're all really powerful, it's the emotional damage that makes the Paladins so difficult to fight. You have to understand that there are literally 27 Wizard Kings besides Julius, all of which Lucius should definitely be able to raise from the dead like he has with so many others. This invasion has only just begun. He's bringing out the more sentimental fighters to really hit them hard, but I wouldn't be surprised to see an armada of even more legendary figures arise if things begin to go south for him. At the same time, Solid couldn't even stand up anymore. Gritting his teeth in frustration, he'd admit to himself that this was all way out of his league. Looking upon the pitiful states of her children, Acier would call out to both Nebra and Solid, telling them that they could have become so much stronger like Noelle had. But their arrogance and hatred warped not only their strength, but even their hearts. They haven't seen their mother in over 17 years, and the first thing they hear is how disappointed they have made her. That's gotta hurt. But I really wonder how the hell she knows all that. Acier would then shift the blame to herself, claiming that she simply didn't love them enough. Again, ouch. And after claiming her death to be her own fault, she apologized for it all, which certainly wasn't helping Solid in the slightest. He'd think back claiming that he tried to be strong, and insisting that he was supposed to have gotten stronger. When his pride was tarnished, he admitted to having grown desperate. But in the end, it seemed as though his efforts were all for nothing. As from there, as she could see his bending weakness for herself, Acier would say that even if they weren't strong, she still loves them all. That in the world of equality and peace her master Lucius sought to create, they could all be reborn and start over together as a family. Solid deeply considered his mother's words. Maybe her proposal wasn't so bad. Maybe he'd take her up on it. But before he could respond, he'd suddenly be called by another sibling of his. It was Noelle. She'd shown up to save them all, telling her older brother that he can't give up. Seeing the girl, Acier would correctly identify her to be her daughter Noelle based on the strong resemblance they shared. Again, with her youngest child now in attendance, Acier would say that once the battle was over, they'd all be reborn. And this time, they'd be with each other for all of existence. Noelle's face lowered as she found her resolve. Thinking back to the defeat of the supreme cursed devil Megecula, despite having only met her spirit before, Noelle was certain that it was the loving embrace of her mother. Speaking up to the celestial being as her hair blew in the wind, Noelle would let her know that despite being Acier Silva, she was no longer the Acier Silva they'd known. Rousing the spirit of her house, Noelle would vow that she and her siblings would both surpass and defeat their mother. Now, Noelle's words are very telling here. She recognizes that this isn't just her fight alone, and speaks of their entire family coming together to stop their mother, which I think will be absolutely incredible to see given the awful nature of her relationship with them not too long ago. But now, they all know how powerful their sister is, along with the true nature of their mother's demise. But even that's not enough to bridge such a lifelong gap between them. Mostly on account of their shame and pride, it was up to Noelle's forgiveness and strength, which was now on full display. And truly, of all her siblings, her changing of Solid would be the most monumental. Nebra and Solid are not weak. They have noble blood of the highest caliber too. They've just been too stuck up to truly realize their potential. Solid himself was recognized by Wizard King Julius to be a bit problematic due to the fact that he so often fought alone, completely disregarding his comrades as he showed off. He's not someone who listens to just anyone, so Noelle being able to inspire him will be huge. Still grounded and barely clinging to life, Noelle would look over with his grimoire out. He'd managed to say Noelle's name out loud, and despite no longer underestimating her strength, couldn't help but be fearful considering she no longer had the water spirit Undyne with her. As Noelle looked prepared, we would then receive a flashback, filling us in on what had happened to Noelle after she'd witnessed Asta's defeat and erasure. She sat on the rocks by the water alone, crying as all she could think about was Asta, the man she loved who was now gone. She recalled the feeling of helplessness she'd experienced, being unable to help him at all despite her magical strides. She couldn't tap into Saint Stage magic anymore, and never expected to be so ineffective. She really thought she'd grown stronger since Lucifero's invasion. Despite her constant struggles, everything began to feel meaningless as thoughts all too similar to those of her brother Solid's would begin to take root. But even then, she couldn't afford to give in or give up, as she stood up, ready to fight through the pain. Noelle would convince herself that Asta must be alive. She couldn't afford to think otherwise. Clearing the tears from her eyes, Noelle would promise to protect their country so that Asta would have a home to come back to whenever he's ready. And to accomplish that, she would definitely get stronger. As from behind, a familiar voice would point out how Noelle didn't need to be comforted after all. To Noelle's surprise, it was Kahono, the young priestess from the Seabed Temple. Noelle would immediately wonder why the girl was here, as Kahono would explain that something terrible happened at the temple, so she really needed Noelle's help. Now Noelle was even more confused, but Kahono would reassure her that everything would be fine now that they had Noelle, then more confidently saying that she could tell Noelle had gotten stronger. We would then be taken to an insane underwater scene as Kahono said that she had a strong feeling that the crisis on the verge of hitting the Clover Kingdom, and the other kingdoms for that matter, had something to do with it. From there we would have Kahono, Kiato, and Noelle standing before a gargantuan, darkly scaled aquatic serpent. As countless people prayed before the creature, Noelle was more than shocked to see the dragon. This was the god of the sea that the people of the underwater temple had been worshipping since ancient times. It was prophesied that when the end of the world was near, the dragon of the raging sea would awaken from its extended sleep. And just like the legend said, the sea god had now arisen. Now speaking, the godly dragon of the sea would explain that once the entire world is endangered, it begins to go berserk, which is why it required a strong contractor. To this end, Kahono had been looking for someone who could assimilate a power similar to the ones possessed by the spirits. One that also happened to be an extraordinary water mage. As in the present, instead of a spirit like Yuno or a devil like Asta, Noelle now called upon a god. And its name was Leviathan. as in its adorable chibi form, the little dragon would agree. Now, I know this may feel like a pretty sudden power-up for Noelle, but aside from the fact that Leviathan wouldn't rise until the end of the world, this exact thing was set up heavily almost 300 chapters ago. During the Sea Temple arc, the first time Noelle ever really tapped into her full potential, she used her signature attack, Sea Dragon's Roar, for the very first time. And despite meeting it with his own incredibly powerful magic, the attack completely tore off Veto's arm. And when her attack continued along its trajectory and tore through several feet of stone, it was observed by the temple's people, who immediately revered it to be the Sea God. And while Yami was blown away by her true power, the temple's head priest, Gifso, immediately presumed her to be the Sea God incarnate, before quickly correcting himself to say that she's actually a goddess. Noelle has been building towards this moment for a very long time, and it's honestly mind-blowing to think that the water spirit Undyne was pretty much just a stepping stone for her. A bit of field experience she needed to be able to handle an even greater power. Just then, a grimoire would spread open quickly as Solid simply looked upon his sister, who never seemed to stop getting stronger and growing more dependable. The Sea siblings, now just as pumped up, would cry out to Noelle as Noelle remained on his knees behind them. Then a watery power, the likes of which were unlike any we had ever seen before, would begin to coalesce before the angelic Acier Silva. Solid couldn't believe it. Noelle was still getting stronger and stronger, as to emerge would be the dragon form of Noelle's Valkyrie armor, a dazzling upgrade to her already astounding power that she would use to surpass her mother. Noelle's Valkyrie form was previously the peak of her power. Now it's been empowered by a dragon god, as every time you get back on your feet, you stand up stronger. And it's crazy to think that while Noelle was becoming a dragon master, Asta was slaying a dragon of his own in the Land of the Sun. And listen, if Leviathan, this ancient creature that only arises as a final defense against the end of the world, is anything close to the power of the dragon Asta defeated, we are in for some serious excitement with this fight. And this strength was something her mother certainly could not deny, immediately commending her child and expressing her pride in such a feat. The time has come, so be sure to leave us your predictions for the rest of this fight. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.